And welcome to today's video on Robert Frost's poem Fire and Ice. Fire and Ice was written in 1920 in his book New Hampshire. You know, as you know, he grew up in New Hampshire, which is in America. It's around Boston. And 1920s kind of sits between two world wars. And as you know, according to Robert Frost's previous poem, After Apple Picking, we know that a lot of technological advancements were happening during that time. So after World War I, Robert Frost wanted to discuss humanity's, so that means humans' capacity for self-destruction. So as you guys know, during World War I and World War II, so many terrible things were happening all around the globe. And one positive thing from world wars is technological advancements. But the negative thing as well is also the development of terrible things like nuclear weapons. You know, those ideas kind of reflect Fire and Ice because it talks about the end of the world. The whole purpose of this is about the end of the world. In a modern sense, we could also think about how humanity affects the natural environment. So it's the devastating impact of the natural environment. You know, during this time when it came out, like the 20s, think about other things that were happening in the world. You know, we've got people like Hitler and even the KKK, because don't forget that Robert Frost is from America. And during this time, you know, around 1920, 1923, the Ku Klux Klan was so popular. They had 4 million, or not M, give me a second, 4 million members. All right, so there are a lot of things to cover with Fire and Ice. It's a nice and short poem that is really concise, but there are so many layers to it. So a lot of the themes of Fire and Ice is about the end of the world, but he also wants to talk about, you know, easing tensions. You know, like it's talking about humanity in a general sense, like Robert Frost was so open-minded and didn't like people fighting one another that even President Kennedy, he actually brought him to Russia. So he was sent to Russia in an effort to ease tensions. By Kennedy, who was the president of the United States. On the topic of politics, his father was actually very, very political. So I don't know if he didn't really have the best relationship, the best relationship with his father. So maybe the fact that he didn't really get along with his dad reflects the fact that he doesn't like the fact that there are two sides to politics, very, you know, as we know, left wing and right wing, Labor and liberal, or liberal and, what's the American one? Republican. So maybe a lot of his poems kind of reflect his sense of like, why do we have to fight about our opposing views? At the end of the day, we're all human. All right, so now let's get started with the poem. Usually I don't read the poems, but since Fire and Ice is so short, I'll be reading it to you guys. So let's scroll all the way down. Fire and Ice. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. That's what I've tasted of desire. I hold with those who favour fire. But if I had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that destruction ice is also great and would suffice. All right, guys, so before we start analysing, let's have a look at the form. So this poem is 9 lines with no poetic form, also known as free verse. So a poetic form is essentially like a sonnet. It has certain kind of rhyme schemes. It could be something like a limerick or a haiku. So this free verse is basically like him writing on a whim, and there are quite a few tonal shifts in it. So tonal is basically the way the composer is speaking to you. So Robert Frost throughout this poem is speaking in a very casual and nonchalant way, and he shows us through a series of techniques. So there are 9 lines, but there are 3 sentences throughout the poem. So the poem unfolds in 3 different stages. So the sentences are actually kind of split up, and they are split up for a particular reason. So they're split up in the rhyme scheme. So let's have a look at the 4th point. A, B, A, B, C, B, C, B. To have that nice and easy flow throughout the poem, it uses iambic. So iambic is essentially the emphasis of certain syllables. So it goes ba-dum, 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 kind of like a heartbeat. It's like you're speaking with the beat of a heart. And another important aspect of this poem is that not a single word is wasted. Every single word is there purposefully to convey a certain idea and a certain message, which is, doesn't matter how the world is going to end, because at the end of the day, humanity is going to destroy it. So, and the last thing that I have here is eschatology. So eschatology is the theory of how the world will end. So, kind of like a theologist, they are usually people who are quite religious, and they kind of discuss, I think the world is going to end like this. I think the world is going to end like that. So obviously, Robert Frost is talking about if the world will end with fire or ice. All right, let's scroll down. First things first, let's have a look at Fire and Ice, the title. So not only are we analysing in the sense of the title, we are also looking at the fact that throughout the poem, he repeats fire and ice so many times. So the words fire and ice involves repetition, extended metaphor, antithesis, and motif. So motif and extended metaphor is just basically introducing those ideas again and again, and forms a certain image in your head about what fire and ice could mean. And the antithesis is that fire and ice are polar opposites, but they are 2 sides of the same coin. That means although fire is the opposite of ice, at the end of the day, they do the same thing, which is, destroy the world. So frost means a literal disaster. Will the world end in fire or ice? Will it end in an apocalypse? So kind of like the world will burn in flames, like maybe the sun overheats us, or maybe even our core has exploded, or will it end, with another ice age? Okay, so he's discussing an apocalypse. But, if we look deeper into the poem, the apocalypse ultimately ends by human nature and the imprint humans have on the environment. So it's not the world naturally dying. It's not the world with a new natural ice age. It's the fact that us humans are destroying it with either our passion or our indifference. So basically, if we think of it again in a political sense, some people want to take over the world because they're quite aggressive about it. They think the world should be like this, so everyone needs to follow my way. Or indifference, when we do nothing about it. We just let things unfold themselves. He's saying that the personality traits of someone with high energy is negative, or low energy is negative. No matter what you do, ultimately, it's going to end the world. All right, so, like we stated, the rhyme is to highlight certain words. Let's have a look at the lines to the left here. So some say the world will end in fire. Some say in ice. So this utilizes a range of different types of technique. Low modality, which is essentially a language technique, it means the way they speak is really, really indifferent. Like a high modality, someone is just like, I have to have this phone. Medium modality is it's like, I would like to have this phone. And then low modality is someone like, I don't mind having this phone. So that's what modality is. Anaphora is a type of structure. It's a type of repetition. Instead of repeating one, the difference between repetition and anaphora is that repetition is maybe one word that's repeated throughout the poem, but anaphora is repeated phrases in the beginning of a line. So some say is anaphora. And the tone, like I mentioned earlier, the tone is basically how the author, composer, persona is speaking. And the mood is the feeling that we get from it. I have written down here a whole list of types of tone that the composer employs. So you can use any of these ideas in your analysis. So the tone is quite anecdotal. Anecdotal means like it's kind of like he's speaking about a short story. He's very casual, detached, dry, impartial. So those first few lines is essentially stating like, I guess I don't mind. Some say this, like he doesn't have a firm stance. He's very like, I don't care. I'm impartial. I'm indifferent, right? This is very ironic. It is ironic because his tone is so casual, but he is talking about something so serious. It's almost like a joke. It's kind of like funny. It's comic. So this, we know that that this poem is an informal discussion about a serious topic. So the persona, so not the composer, the persona, so the character within the poem is not convinced by one of the other. So the word some kind of alludes that he's depersonalizing these ideas. He's not saying that this is my sole stance. So that is what some say means. So it's low modality, anaphora, and it reflects the tone. If we move on to the left over here, first person. So that repetition down here, I don't know, I, but if. So that first person is a subjective stance. So subjective means that it is formed around opinion. The opposite of subjective is objective. So you're looking at it from a sense with no backed up emotions. So he's talking about his personal experience and and it's almost as if he is reflecting on his ideas, okay? I want you to also consider, so he's saying, from what I've tasted of desire, I hold those who favor fire. But if I had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction ice is also great and would suffice. Who on earth is this man talking to? Is he talking to himself? Maybe he's in solitude. He's thinking, I wonder how the war will end. Is he talking to us, the reader, or maybe to a friend? So maybe he has someone that he is currently talking to. Those are things to consider when reading this poem. All right, so as you can see, I have two different types of blue. They are still sound techniques, but I've decided to select a different type of blue for some of these S words. So if you have a look at this light blue I have here, some say ice, tasted, desire, those, cherish, twice, say, destruction, ice, also, is, suffice. This type of technique is called sibilance. So it is the repetition. It's kind of a form of alliteration, the repetition of s, k, t sounds. This sound is usually to reflect the sound of hissing. So, right? So if we think of hissing, we think of snake. And if we think back to after apple picking, they were talking about Adam and Eve. So we could think about that hissing sound as a snake hissing. We can talk about the end of the world. Maybe we can talk about the devil or sin or death. What comes after death? The afterlife. What is the afterlife? Does it exist? So we've got the S, C, 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 T sounds, but it also creates this sense of coldness but it could also be soothing. So what I want you to also have a look at is the use of the alliteration in the lines favor fire. So you can see that favor fire is still in blue. So we're talking about this sound, which could also mean the cold. So maybe it could sound like the wind blowing into your window. Meanwhile, favor fire, this use of alliteration sounds like flickering, flaming, fiery, flare, inferno, flames, candle. So the words favor fire is so sudden and obvious. It makes us think about the flickering of humanity's future. But if we compare these two sounds together, what you can conclude with is that the sound is something really cold. Meanwhile, the f sounds very fiery. So you could also argue that maybe the favor fire, the sibilance could be maybe extinguishing that fire. So that is the purpose of the repetition of the sounds and the f sounds, is to make us think about other elements, and those elements are fire and ice, something that's repeated throughout this poem. And drawing it back to the line favor, so favor is essentially like a warning about emotional extremes. Like I said, fire and ice could mean so many things. If we think about it in a deeper level, fire can mean passion and ice can mean indifference. So he's saying those who favor fire, he's saying, maybe we should be careful about these emotional extremes. Maybe we shouldn't choose one side, which is just fiery ice. Okay, let's move on to line 5. So, but. It begins with the line but. This is a conjunction, and it also indicates that tonal shift for readers to start to reflect, and consider the ramifications of the different types of relationships. So again, a passionate relationship, an indifferent relationship. We can think about fire and ice in a literal sense of how the world is going to end, maybe how humanity is going to end the world, or maybe even how we approach our relationships in our life. Maybe you can destroy your relationship by being too passionate and too in your face, or you can lose it by not really caring. So, but just kind of shows again that the person who's speaking is very indifferent. He doesn't have a certain opinion. He's just trying to make us think about how we see the world. All right, but if I had to perish twice, so perish in this sense is die. How am I going to die? Perish twice. Can you die twice? No, you can't die twice. So this is an oxymoron. Again, he is showing his indifference and no particular stance. So at the end of the day, he doesn't matter. This is very important, and I'm going to go through that a bit later. So perish twice, that oxymoron. He's saying, hey, look, if I died during fire, if I died during ice, I don't care. All right, another technique of its form is enjambment. We did go in depth with this in after apple picking. So essentially enjambment is the continuation of a sentence but split up by certain lines. So as you can see here, we've got a full stop there, but this is a whole... Oh, no. This... Oh, no. This is a whole sentence. All right, so why is it being split into many different bits? All right, so enjambment is used to control the phrase lengths to mimic, again, that conversational tone. When we talk, there are no clear sentences. It is just us speaking and pausing at random times. It goes in between tetrameter and diameter. So iambic pentameter is basically like 6 lines, but a tetrameter is 4 feet per line and diameter is 2 feet per line. So basically it's like how many syllables in the line. So there are no controlled poetic lines, and it kind of, again, it juxtaposes that serious topic and casual tone. A lot of the analysis of this poem is basically the use of certain sounds and also the way sentences are structured for him to be relaxed about this serious topic. All right, so in those last 2 lines, it is also great and would suffice. So he's saying the destruction of ice. He's saying he's happy if the world will end in fire or ice. If it ends in ice, whatever, he doesn't care. So this is really important, because why did he not make the last line one line? Why didn't he just have 8 lines in his poem and he could have had a different rhyme scheme? Why didn't he just say, to say that for destruction ice is also great and would suffice? Instead, it is to say for the destruction ice, it is great and would suffice. When you are analyzing poems, don't, you ask questions of why they put it there, but you got to also ask questions of why didn't they make it like this instead? So he uses the rhyme scheme and assonance of ice to build a momentum to proceed to a disturbing conclusion. He had that repetition of ice in line 7, so suffice would stand out more. All right, so we don't know the stance of the speaker, and we will never discover how the world will end in fire and ice. So suffice, he's basically saying, I don't care. But also the contradiction and the use on conjunction, but if, in line 5, and then to suffice, he's kind of like saying, but if it's ice, I don't mind. And then he's saying that he's happy with suffice. So he's kind of like getting rid of that contradiction. But basically, I want you to consider, we will never, ever know if the world will end in fire or ice. We will never be able to live that long to know how it ends. And that's what he's reflecting on. But the thing that we do know, and this is very important, we do know that no matter what we do, the world will end in our hands, in humanity's hands, because we are going to, in a modern sense, we are going to destroy the world by environmental issues. Before, during the era where he wrote this, maybe we were going to end the world through atomic weapons. Think of Hiroshima in Japan. He's saying, I don't care whether or not we die in fire and ice, because at the end of the day, I'm not going to be there. But I know for a fact that humans are going to destroy this earth. That is the purpose of this poem. It's making us consider, who we are, what we are doing, and that we are ending the world through sheer selfishness and indifference and passion. So again, we do not know the stance of the speaker. So that is the general sense of this poem. I want you to also think about, they also uses allusion. It mentions Dante's Inferno. So he's an Italian poet. He wrote the Divine Comedy, and he discusses a man's descent into hell, and that there are 9 lines and 9 circles of hell. So there are 9 lines in this poem, and the allusion to Dante's Inferno is that there are 9 circles of hell. In Canto 32, he says, the betrayers of their own kind are plunged while in a fiery hell, up to their necks in ice. So in Dante's version of hell, it is actually an ice-scape. So that's another thing that you can kind of refer to. So the essence of this poem is basically a casual guy talking about how the world will end, and he comes to the conclusion that, doesn't matter, because either way, humans are going to stuff it up. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this poem. I know I certainly did. It's a very easy poem to remember. And before you go, I want to ask the question, do you think the world is going to end in fire or ice? And why? Have a beautiful day, guys. That's all from me. Bye from Miss Chan. Bye.